Today we're getting into an interesting lesson. I don't know if I'll get all the way through everywhere I was going to go, so this one might be split in two. But just to give you a little bit of a background, because there are some chapters that we're skipping. We just can't go through every single thing. So David was told, if you remember last week, that it was going to be his own family that's going to be his enemy. All right, that was due to his sin. You reap what you sow, kind of thing, okay? In the middle of this, one of his sons assaults his daughter. They're half siblings, but one assaults the other one. And Absalom, another son, kills Amnon. That's the other son. We didn't really go through that, but just to kind of give you a background. David did not handle it well. He did not handle it really like he was supposed to. He just kind of brushes it off. It seems like in scripture, okay? And Absalom really takes offense to that because he loved his sister, and he's thinking he's doing the right thing by avenging her, getting revenge and everything like that, because it was wrong what Amnon done. So one of his sons is already dead because of this. Absalom and David are estranged for a while, and so this is where we're picking up in the story. Okay, so 2 Samuel 12, 11 through 12. Thus says the Lord, and this is just the reminder here, behold, I will raise up adversity against you from your own house. Okay, I will take your wives before your eyes and will give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. What David did in secret, God's going to do out in the open. All right. For you did it in secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel, before the sun. All right, so Absalom fled and went to Geshur and was there 3 years. This is during the separation period. And King David longed to go to Absalom, for he had been comforted concerning Amnon because he was dead. All right, so Amnon assaulted Tamar. Tamar lives, but Amnon's not. But Tamar and Absalom, they are full siblings in this. They share the same mother. All right, and the king said to Joab, y'all know who Joab is, his nephew that's over the army. He's the brother of Abishai. He says, all right, I have granted this thing. Go, therefore, bring back the young man Absalom. So he was mad at him for killing Amnon. They've been separated for 3 years. He's finally, I guess, over his grief enough to miss Absalom. So he doesn't go for him himself. You would think that he would, but he doesn't. He sends Joab. And Joab's not the most tactful person. He's pretty much an assassin for hire, okay? And you're sending him to get your son. Then Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself, and he thanked the king. And Joab said, today your servant knows that I have found favor in your sight, my lord, O king, and that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant. They could see that David missed Absalom, so they've been trying to convince him for this reconciliation. So Joab arose and went to Geshur and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said, let him return to his own house, but do not let him see my face. Now this is odd, because he misses him, he wants to see him, and he sends somebody to get him, but he's not going to come before him. Like, tell him to go to his own house, not to come to mine. He's the king's son. Remember? All right, remember Mephibosheth? He said, you're always welcome at the king's table. This is his son, and yet he's not welcoming him here. He's just like, you can go to your own house. All right. He says, so Absalom returned to his own house, but did not see the king's face. Now, in all Israel, there was no one who was praised as much as Absalom for his good looks. From the sole of his foot to the crown of his head, there was no blemish in him. This is already sounding bad, right? You're already seeing that pride probably building up. And when he cut the hair of his head, at the end of every year, he cut it because it was heavy on him. And when he cut it, he weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels according to the king's standard. Now, I know y'all all want to know how much his hair weighed. All right, now, my hair's long, right? His hair weighed about 5.5 to 6 pounds after 1 year. This has not been growing a year, but whatever he had on his hair was working. 5.5 to 6 pounds. That is a lot of weight on your head. It's crazy, right? To Absalom were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. He named his daughter after his sister. His sister never had any children or anything because of what happened to her, but he named his daughter after his sister. I thought that was, touching. It showed how much he loved her. And she was a woman of beautiful appearance. And Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem, but did not see the king's face. So he's separated for 3 years. He's in Jerusalem for 2 years, and still he doesn't see his father. Therefore, Absalom sent for Joab to send him to the king, but he would not come. So he's actually sending for Joab, because Joab's the one that got him. He wants him to be the middleman. Like, Joab, can you go, get me to the king or whatever? But Joab didn't come to him. And when he sent a second time, he would not come. So he said to his servant, "See, Joab's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go set it on fire." Well, that's a way to get him to come, isn't it? And Absalom's servant set the field on fire. Then Joab arose and came to Absalom's house. It worked. And he said, "Why have your servants set my field on fire?" And Absalom answered Joab, "Look, I sent to you saying, 'Come here so that I may send you to the king to say, why have I come from Geshur? It would have been better for me to still be there. Now therefore, let me see the king's face. But if there is iniquity in me, let him execute me.'" He's pretty much in misery. Listen, there's no point in me coming here if I'm not ever going to see my dad again. I would have been better off over here. He's right. David's not handling this well either. He didn't handle Amnon's assault well. He did not handle this well. So Joab went to the king and told him, and when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and he bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king. Then the king kissed Absalom. Now, one of the things here, I'll tell you, just because they see each other again, it doesn't mean that everything's okay. They're cordial. David kisses his son. There's that familial bond, but there's still a lot of resentment. And that's what we're fixing to see. After this happened, that Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So it was whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for a decision, that Absalom would call to him and say, "What city are you from?" And he would say, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel." This showed that he knew what he was doing. He knew if they were from here, they were from this tribe. He's catching the people that have grievances that they would go before the king. He's catching them before they get to the king. And he's trying to handle all of the things that are coming up. This is a strategic move. And then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your case is good and right, but there is no deputy of the king to hear you." Moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, that there were made a judge in the land, and everyone who has had any suit or cause would come to me, then I would give him justice." All right, you see what he's doing? Well, you know what? You can't go see the king, but, if I were made judge over the land, I would give you justice. You have a good cause here. If I were just had this power, I would give you justice. It's a manipulation is what that is. And so it was whenever anyone came near to bow to him, that he would put his hand on him and take him and kiss him. Now, this is just the greeting of, like a familiar greeting back then. You just didn't just do this to strangers. This was somebody like they would have to be a close friend for you to, hug them, embrace them. And usually it was like the kiss on the cheek. If you remember Judas, when he came to Jesus in the garden, what did he do? He kissed him on the cheek. So this is something he's pretty much saying, yeah, we're close. Yeah, we're close. He's playing the people into what he wants. In this manner, Absalom acted towards all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. That's what he set out to do, and he knew how to do it. All right. Now it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said to the king, please let me go to Hebron and pay the vow which I made to the Lord. For your servant took a vow while I dwelt at Geshur in Syria, saying, if the Lord indeed brings me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said to him, go in peace. So he arose and he went to Hebron. He's throwing the Lord in it. Do you notice that? Oh, well, let me go do this because I told the Lord this. Of course, David's going to let him go. It has to do with the Lord. Then Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron. This is another strategic move. Because let's just say you have like all these little villages. I'm going to say villages instead of cities. And you have somebody sent to all of them. And when you hear a certain sound, everybody's going to proclaim it, because if one person proclaims it, other people's going to jump on. And when this tribe does it, or this village does it, then this village will do it, and this village will do it. And just because everybody says it, it makes it so. Is that not what our media does? They just keep repeating things until people believe it. And they herald it from this network and then this network. Same thing. It's propaganda. So propaganda is nothing new. All right, happened back here. All right, and with Absalom went 200 men invited from Jerusalem, and they went along innocently and did not know anything. So 200 men from Jerusalem, they didn't know his plan. They didn't know what he was going to do. So they're innocent in his manipulations here. Then Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor from the city, from Gilo, where he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy grew strong, for the people with Absalom continually increased in number. Now a messenger came to David, saying, the hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom. So David said to all of his servants who were with him at Jerusalem, arise and let us flee, or we shall not escape from Absalom. Time out. Where's the guy who stood against the giant? Where's the man who stood against the Philistines over and over and over? Where's the one who came back and killed his 10,000s? Where's that warrior at? He's buckling because of his son. All right? Make haste to depart. He's not even willing to fight. Did he ask God right here? You remember every other time we've read before he goes to battle, when there's an enemy, David prays. He waits for an answer. That's what makes him the man after God's own heart. And here, it's like his heart is just melted as wax. I can't stand up against my son. Absalom has the heart of the people. Everybody just pack up and go. He didn't handle this well either. All right, it says, lest he overtake us suddenly and bring disaster upon us and strike the city with the edge of the sword. And the king's servant said to him, we are your servants, ready to do whatever my lord the king commands. Then the king went out with all his household after him. But the king left 10 women, concubines, to keep the house. That's going to be a mistake. And the king went out with all of the people after him and stopped at the outskirts. Now you can see David, it took him so long to get to the throne. It took him so long, all this fighting, everything that he went through. And now he just leaves on his own accord because he didn't ask God, and he gets to the edge of the city. Can you imagine him looking back? Knowing that his son's the one that's coming to take the throne. It had to be heartbreaking. He's already lost one son. You know, his family's in turmoil. He's not handling things well. And now this. And the king went out with all the people after him and stopped at the outskirts. Then all of his servants passed before him, and all of the Cherethites and all of the Pelethites and all the Gittites, 600 men who had followed him from Gath, passed before the king. Then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why are you also going with us? Return and remain with the king." Time out. Is Absalom the king yet? Do you remember what God did with the first king, Saul? He said, "Today the kingdom has been rent from you and been given to your neighbor, for I have found me a man after God's own heart." Did God do it here? God didn't move the kingship. David did. David did. Do we do that sometimes? We think that maybe we have a good idea of what God thinks, or, we put it in our own human perspective. Well, it'll be better if I just do this. But maybe that's not what God wants. He's not waiting on God right here. He says, "For you are a foreigner and also an exile from your own place. In fact, you came only yesterday. Should I make you wander up and down with us today, since I go, I know not where?" Like, I don't even know where I'm going. Are you sure you want to come to me? You just came here yesterday. I mean, it makes sense why he would say that. He's trying to look out for this man. "Return and take your brethren back. Mercy and truth be with you." But Ittai answered the king and said, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely in whatever place my lord the king shall be, whether in death or life, even there also your servants will be." He's talking to David. David moved the kingship, and then this guy Ittai, he put it back on where it needs to be. He's calling David the king. And he puts the Lord in there. All right, so David said to Ittai, "Go and cross over." Then Ittai the Gittite and all of his men and all the little ones who were with him crossed over. And all the country wept with a loud voice, and all the people crossed over. The king himself also crossed over the brook Kidron, and all the people crossed over towards the way of the wilderness. There was Zadok also. Now, I know we read over that and we think, okay, well, who's Zadok? But he's going to be an important figure, because there's going to be promises made around Zadok. All right, so if you were in the priestly line, you had to be a Levite from Aaron's line, right? Okay, and after this, because Zadok is faithful to David, it's going to kind of add on through Zadok's line for them to be priests after this point. So to be a priest from the Lord, you've got to be from the Levite Aaron's line and also Zadok's line. So Zadok also and all the Levites with him, who'd they carry with them? They didn't leave God in the temple. David's like, well, I guess if I'm going, I'm taking God with me. I don't blame him. I would have taken him with me too. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar went up until all the people had finished crossing over from the city. Then the king said to Zadok, "Carry the ark of God back into the city." Why is he doing this? He carried the ark all this way, and now he's telling the priest to take it back. But listen what he does. "If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back." Finally. I want to say finally, but why do you get so far and do that? Why didn't he do this in the city? Why leave in the first place? All right. It says, "He will bring me back and show me both it and his dwelling place." That's the ark. That's where God dwelt, right? So I will see the ark again, if God means for me to. But he says this, I have no delight in you. Here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. So we do see that he's trusting God. If he wants me back on the throne, he's going to make a way. If he doesn't, let him just deal with me. Let him deal with me however. So the king also said to Zadok the priest, "Are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and you and your 2 sons, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar." See, I will wait in the plains of the wilderness until the word comes from you to inform me. Therefore Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. Just because they carried the ark back, just because they remained there, does not mean that they were not on David's side. They were doing what he had commanded them to do. All right? It's not that they're with Absalom just because they go back. So David went up by the ascent of the Mount of Olives, and he wept as he went up. And he had his head covered, and he went barefoot. And all the people who were with him covered their heads and went up, weeping as they went up. Then someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. Now, Ahithophel, he was like a counselor to David. If you would consider like an inner court, your advisors, that's who he was. But what we don't pick up on is this was Bathsheba's grandfather. And you're like, oh, okay. Well, he might be bitter about what happened with Bathsheba and all of that stuff. So he's not with David. He's played the part, where he acts like he's one of David's advisors, and he's been secretly helping Absalom get power. And David said, now listen, this is what he prays. O Lord, I pray, turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. Okay, I can see that too. Now it happened when David had come to the top of the mountain where he worshiped God, there was Hushai the Archite coming to meet him with his robe torn and dust on his head. People knew that the king was leaving. Now this, again, is a sign of mourning. The sackcloth ashes where they tear their robes and they put ashes on. So they were mourning. David said to him, if you go on with me, then you will become a burden to me. And I think David here was thinking, the more people I have, the harder it's going to be to take care of them. Because you don't want your people to go hungry. You don't want them to go without provision. That's what he's worried about. He's not really worried about himself at this moment. He's worried about everybody who's wanting to come with him. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I was your father's servant previously, so I will now also be your servant, then you may defeat the counsel of Ahithophel for me. So what, in a sense, he's doing is saying, hey, if you go back and you pretend to be his advisor, you can counter what Ahithophel says. It's another smart move. He's got a man on the inside. And do you not have Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? Again, that shows they're on David's side, or you could say the Lord's side. Therefore it will be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall tell Zadok and Abiathar the priest. All right, so he's got 3 in the city now. Indeed, they might have with them their 2 sons, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son, and by them you shall send me everything you hear. So now we got 2 runners that's going to be able to deliver messages. So Hushai, David's friend, went into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. When David was a little past the top of the mountain, there was Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth. Now y'all fixing to get mad, because we went over Mephibosheth and just how pure and, oh my goodness, that story was. I love that story. He's an adopted son at the king's table. This was Jonathan's son, David's best friend, son. All right, now Ziba was his servant. All right, so Ziba, he comes up, he says, who met with a couple of saddled donkeys. So he had saddled these donkeys, on them 200 loaves of bread, 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. He's bringing provisions. Ziba is. And the king said to Ziba, what do you mean to do with these? And Ziba says, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and the summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who are faint in the wilderness to drink. Then the king said, and where is your master's son? So he's asking where Mephibosheth is. And Ziba said to the king, indeed, he is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, Today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom of my father to me. Does that sound like Mephibosheth? The one who fell with lame legs to worship, give obedience to David? It doesn't sound right, does it? He's saying, well, I'm staying in Jerusalem. Absalom's coming. I'm going to get restored to my land. But didn't David already do that? Yeah. So the king said to Ziba, here, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours. So David believed him. And he goes, okay, well, now everything that Mephibosheth has is yours. So now Ziba owns all of the land that David had restored to Mephibosheth. And Ziba says, I humbly bow before you that I may find favor in your sight, my lord, O king. Conniving is what it is. All right, now I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit. Meanwhile, Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel was with him. Shocker. Traitor. And so it was when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom that Hushai said to Absalom, long live the king, long live the king. Which king do you think he meant? David. Right, this is a play of words right here. That's how politicking works, isn't it? Just playing with words. So Absalom said to Hushai, is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend? So Absalom knows this is David's friend. All right, so then Hushai said to Absalom, no, but whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel choose, his I will be, and with him I will remain. Whoever God chooses, that's who I'm for. So he's not really saying I'm with you or I'm with him. Again, this is the wordage here is kind of beautiful that he can do this right here, save his own skin. Furthermore, whom shall I serve? Should I not serve in the presence of his son? That's what David told him to say. As I have served in your father's presence, so I will be in your presence. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, the traitor, give advice as to what we should do. Now I'm going to pause right here for just a second. What Ahithophel is to David, the traitor, Judas is to Jesus. This is one of those typologies where something in David's life matches up with something in Christ's life. They both have an inside traitor. All right? And Ahithophel said to Absalom, go, listen to what he says here, y'all. Go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house, and all Israel will hear that you are abhorred by your father. Then the hands of all who are with you will be strong. Does that make any sense? But what did I read? The first verse I read to you today, what did God say he was going to do? What David did in secret, he was going to do out in the sunlight for all of Israel to see. All right, this is what it has to do with. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the top of the house, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. God already knew that it was going to happen. And so he laid this sin out for all of Israel to see. And you would think as a people they would be disgusted by this, that they would turn away from Absalom. All right, let's keep reading. This is just a fulfillment that God knows what he's talking about. Now the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one had inquired at the oracle of God. So was all the advice from Ahithophel, both with David and with Absalom. Hushai will pretend to be with Absalom because he's going to warn David to flee. We're not going to read all of those, but that's kind of the basis of the next chapter. He's going to just pretend, and he's going to continually warn David because Absalom's going to send troops after David. So we're just kind of going to jump over all of the verses to get to the next part. And David numbered the people who were with him and set captains of thousands and captains of hundreds over them. Then David sent out 1/3 of the people under the hand of Joab, 1/3 under the hand of Abishai the son of Zeruiah, Joab's brother, and 1/3 under the hand of Ittai the Gittite. And the king said to the people, I also will surely go out with you myself. But the people answered, You shall not go out, for if we flee away, they will not care about us, nor if half of us die, will they care about us. But you are worth 10,000 of us now, for you are now more help to us in the city. So it's only through David's connections they know what's happening in Jerusalem. It's only through David that they're all together. If he dies, if something happens to him, they're not going to stay together. You know, he's the glue right here. So the king said to them, Whatever seems best to you, I will do. So the king stood beside the gate, and all the people went out by the hundreds and by the thousands. Now the king had commanded Joab, Abishai, and Ittai, saying, Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom. This guy's sending people out, even though it's his son, to kill you, to kill your people who are following you. And David has the nerve to say, deal gently with him. But that's his son. I can see that. No matter what your child does, you still love him, right? This is a torn David right here. And I can completely understand it. And all the people heard when the king gave all the captains orders concerning Absalom. I'm sure he probably just wants him imprisoned, and then they're going to go back. That's probably what's in his head. So the people went out into the field of battle against Israel, and the battle was in the woods of Ephraim. The people of Israel were overthrown there before the servants of David, and a great slaughter of 20,000 took place there that day. For the battle there was scattered over the face of the whole countryside, and the woods devoured more people that day than the sword devoured. Now we've already went over this somewhat in Joshua. God can use nature to bring about his will. There was one where the hailstones killed more than the sword. In this case, the woods or the forest kills more than with the sword, and God can do that. Then Absalom met the servants of David, and Absalom rode a mule. The mule went under the thick boughs of a great terebinth tree, and his head caught in the terebinth tree. Now, I want you to picture this. He's got 6 pounds of hair on his head, and he's riding the mule, and I'm sure it's flowing, like this. And he goes through the branches, and it's and he's stuck. All right, his pride was his downfall. Does that sound familiar? Okay. So he was left hanging between heaven and earth, and the mule which was under him went on. He's dangling in the tree, literally, by his beautiful hair. Now a certain man saw it and told Joab, wrong person to tell, and said, I just saw Absalom hanging in a terebinth tree. So this had to take time. Why ain't somebody cutting him down? Why ain't he breaking limbs to get down? But he must have been caught, snatched up pretty good. So Joab said to the man who told him, You just saw him? Why did not you strike him there to the ground? I would have given you 10 shekels of silver and a belt. Why didn't you kill him there? He's the enemy. You could have ended the whole thing. But the man said to Joab, Though I were to receive 1,000 shekels of silver in my hand, I would not raise my hand against the king's son. That shows the respect they had for David. Not Absalom, but for David, because he said, deal gently with Absalom. Everybody knew it. For in our hearing the king commanded you and Abishai and Ittai, saying, Beware lest anyone touch the young man Absalom. Otherwise I would have dealt falsely against my own life, for there is nothing hidden from the king, and you yourself would have set yourself against me. That would have been my death sentence. I'd have been killed by you. David would have sent you, and probably so. Then Joab said, I cannot linger with you. And he took 3 spears in his hand, and he thrust them through Absalom's heart, while he was still alive in the midst of the terebinth tree. He never got free. And Joab took care of it. And 10 young men who bore Joab's armor surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. So pretty much Joab had the killing blow, but they wasn't going to be left out. They did it as a unit. So Joab blew the trumpet, for the people returned from pursuing Israel, for Joab held back the people. And they took Absalom, now listen to this, and they cast him into a large pit in the woods, and laid a very large heap of stones over him. What did stacked up stones mean? Remember this. Remember? When they come out of the wilderness, they stacked up stones, and it was supposed to be a monument to remember what happened here. When they crossed the Jordan into the promised land, they stacked up stones. It was a monument. Remember what happened here. They also did it on the top of Shechem. They piled up stones. Remember what happened here. When Absalom's killed, they throw him into the woods, pile up stones. Remember what happened here. Then all of Israel fled, everyone to his tent. Now Absalom in his lifetime had taken and set up a pillar for himself. I bet it had some kind of something to do with his hair or something. All right. People who set up monuments to themselves, does that sound a lot like Saul, the first king? Yeah, he wasn't giving glory to God. He was giving glory to himself. He wanted to be remembered. Which is in the king's valley, for he said, I have no son to keep my name in remembrance. He called the pillar after his own name, and to this day it is called Absalom Monument. Now I'm going to pause right here to tell you, there's some things online when you look up Absalom. It says in Jerusalem there's Absalom's tomb that has been discredited. That actually dates back to the 1st century, and it matches up with the archaeology at Masada. They really think that that's Herod Agrippa's tomb. It's just that people started calling it Absalom's tomb, and it kind of stuck. But he was never buried there. He was buried to the north in the, like right here, it literally tells us in the woods in the Ephraim, right. So this one was built 1,000 years after David's reign. This tomb was. It matches more up with the Herod Agrippa, not Herod the Great. Herod the Great was buried at Masada. But this would have been Herod the Great's grandson, Herod Agrippa. And I know that's hard to understand too, because there's like 4 Herods in the New Testament. And if you don't have a good study Bible, you don't know which one it's talking about. But I thought this was kind of interesting when it kind of got the moniker of Absalom's tomb, even though it's not. They said that parents would take their children to it and they would spit on it. And they would say, if you don't start acting better, you're going to end up just like Absalom. But, you know, they were kind of using that, even though it wasn't his, as like a monument of what happens, you know, when you don't obey God. And I thought that was kind of interesting. If they really knew where Absalom's, you know, body was, they would probably do the same thing. But it's not actually Absalom's monument or tomb, the one that's in Jerusalem now, if you come across that. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said, let me run now and take the news to the king, how the Lord has avenged of his enemies. And Joab said to him, you shall not take the news this day, for you shall take the news another day. But today you shall take no news, because the king's son is dead. Then Joab said to the Cushite, go tell the king what you have seen. So the Cushite bowed himself to Joab and ran. It's a little interesting that it uses the term Cushite. The Cushites derive from Cush, son of Ham, in Genesis chapter 10. And today that would be Ethiopia. Have y'all ever watched the running, like the track meets? Ethiopians are fast. They are really, really fast. That's who he sends running, is going to be a Cushite, somebody from Ethiopia. So he's pretty fast, I would say. Then Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok, said again to Joab, but whatever happens, please let me also run after the Cushite. Joab says, why will you run, my son, since you have no news ready? But whatever happens, let me run. So he said to him, run. Then Ahimaaz ran by the way of the plain, and he outrun the Cushite. That's amazing. Now David was sitting between the two gates, and the watchman went up on the roof over the gate to the wall, lifted his eyes and looked, and there was a man running alone. Then the watchman cried out and told the king, and the king said, "If he is alone, there is news in his mouth." And he came rapidly and drew near. Then when the watchman saw another man running, the watchman called to the gatekeeper and said, "There is another man running alone." And the king said, "He also brings news." So the watchman said, "I think the running of the first is like the running of Ahimaaz, the son of Zadok." And the king said, "He's a good man, and he comes with good news." So Ahimaaz called out and said to the king, "All is well." Then he bowed down with his face to the earth before the king and said, "Blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered you up the men who raised their hand against my lord the king." Thus the king says, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" Ahimaaz answered. This is not the Cushite. This is Ahimaaz. "When Joab sent the king's servant and me, your servant, I saw a great tumult, but I did not know what it was about." And the king said, "Turn aside and stand here." So that he turned aside and he stood still. Then the Cushite came, and the Cushite said, "There is good news, my lord the king, for the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose against you." And the king said to the Cushite, "Is the young man Absalom safe?" So the Cushite answered, "May the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise against you to do harm be like that young man." So he knows. He knows now that Absalom is dead. Then the king was deeply moved, and he went up into the chamber over the gate, and he wept. And as he went, he said thus, "O my son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died in your place, O my son Absalom." This is the grieving father. This isn't the king right here. And it's going to be hard right here for him to see past his grief that the Lord, is secure in his throne. All right, so that's what I have. I made it halfway. So we're going to stop right there.